Welcome to Police Academy Prep. This is Deputy Z. Today we will be going through the Law Enforcement High Liability book of the Police Academy, going into Chapter 4, Criminal Justice Defensive Tactics. This will be the in-depth recording version where I read from the entire chapter and provide insight to potential test questions and real-life situations. Let's go ahead and jump into the material. The public often focuses attention on the decisions and methods that criminal justice officers practice in use of force situations. Defensive tactics definition, bolded test question here, is a system of controlled defensive and offensive body movements that criminal justice officers use to respond to a subject's aggression or resistance. These techniques are based on a combination of martial arts, wrestling, and boxing. Know that fitness, strength, agility, balance, and flexibility are vital to developing these skills. This next sentence here is also a test question. The role of defensive tactics is to assist the officer in restraining or arresting a person. Depending on the situation, officers will use various force levels in applying defensive tactics techniques. Another test question here. Any defensive weapon or technique has the potential to cause injury, great bodily harm, or death, which is why it's so important to understand when and how to use appropriate techniques. All right, here we go. Warm-up and cool-down exercises. For the test, I wouldn't necessarily know the definitions of them or how to properly do them, but just know that they are warm-up stretches. Lunge and twist, knee raises, high kicks, arm swings, arm rotations, arm cross, jump squats, stationary sprints, wrist rotations, etc. Then you have your falling techniques. Test question here. Falling techniques are useful if a subject attacks, pushes you, or hits you with enough force to send you to the ground, or if you trip over an obstacle. You have your front fall. I'm not going to go to the steps and how to do these. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. If you're falling towards a prone position in front, prone is, the definition of this is bolded, it is lying on the stomach face down, okay? Stomach face down. And then supine is on your back face up. Then you have your rear fall, okay? You have your side fall. You're falling to the side, pretty self-explanatory. Your foundation. Know this for a test question. This position allows you to be ready to engage a subject on the ground or to recover to a standing position. Know the definition of posting. Posting is supporting the balance of the body using a limb. And recovering to a standing position. Your ability to get up safely from a ground encounter is critical. Okay? Use this technique to gain time and distance between you and the aggressive subject. If you do not gain distance, the subject may get on top of you or strike you while trying to get up and get away. Hip escapes allow you to move from side to side to avoid or defend against an attack. The movement in a hip escape is also known as shrimping. Okay, know the definition of shrimping. With shrimping, you can escape from side control and full mount. So just know that as well. A sprawl. A sprawl is usually used to defend against a subject who shoots in for a takedown. So a question on the test might come up just exactly like this. What is used to defend against a subject who shoots in for a takedown? And that'll be a sprawl. It's pretty, I mean, you go over these moves all in class, and they get so ingrained in you, the moves, that you already know, okay, if you're sitting in the test, if someone is shooting at your legs, how do you get your legs away? And you would know based on all your training that it's a sprawl. It's not just book work, you're actually getting hands-on experience. Then we have our recommended cool-down stretches. Just know the names of these just in case they come up. Neck stretch, straight arm behind back stretch, behind neck tricep stretch, arm crossed in front chest, both arms above head stretch, both arms in front of chest stretch, and the butterfly stretch. The spin twist, the supine knee flex stretch, the seated bent knee stretch, the modified hurdler stretch, and the straddle stretch. Then you have your drills. Pummeling drills we'll start off with. Pummeling is a grappling technique, test question, used to gain the double underhook position, which is a dominant control position that can be used in a variety of takedowns and grappling techniques. For example, the front takedown. An overhook is when your arm is over the subject's arm, controlling that arm. An underhook is when your arm is under the subject's arm and controlling the subject's upper body. Know how to do those. Then you have the arm drag drill. The arm drag is a technique where you pull the subject's arm across your body to gain a dominant position. You can use the arm drag to set up a variety of grappling and takedown techniques. For example, escort position or rear takedown. On the test, you may need to know how these drills help with what takedown. So again, the arm drag drill helps with escort or rear takedown, where the pummeling drill helps with the front takedown. Cardiovascular conditioning. This is bold test question. Cardiovascular training is any exercise that elevates the heart rate to a range of 60 to 85% of the maximum rate. That was on the test. If it might ask both ways. It might ask, what is an exercise that elevates the heart rate to this range, cardiovascular training, or it might say, what is the range of cardiovascular training to elevate the heart rate? And you're going to have to pick between, 40 and 50, 50 and 60, 85 to 100, 60 to 85. Just know you have to memorize it at 60 to 85%. When your heart rate is in that range, you are training in a cardiovascular or aerobic state. So just know that's also an aerobic state, and it's a cardiovascular state. So they might say what percentage range is a cardiovascular state. That is 60 to 85%. Just know that there's a lot of health benefits to being in that state. Okay, nutrition. Okay, this essential nutrition and food graph here, you do need to memorize this. There were at least 3 to 5 questions on the test at minimum. So you need to know what nutrient with what function with what sources. So protein provides energy, builds and repairs body cells, is part of various enzymes, hormones, and antibodies. And the sources of protein are meat, poultry, eggs, legumes such as lentils, milk and milk products, vegetables, nuts, seeds, seafood, and grains. Carbohydrates, they provide energy needed by the brain, nervous system, red blood cells, and other cells. Bread, cereals, rice, pasta, fruit, vegetables, milk, and sugar. Fat provides energy and essential fatty acids, carries other fat-soluble nutrients like vitamins, is part of cell membranes around nerves, hormones, and bile for fat digestion. You get these from meat, poultry, fish, milk and milk products, nuts and seeds, oils, butters, margarine, and salad dressing. So from what I recall on the test, because a lot of the sources are similar, when it comes to memorizing the sources, just memorize which ones are different from the other. So with fat, I think I had a salad dressing or butter question, because that one was unique to that one. And what else was unique to that one? Not nuts and seeds, because they all kind of have that. With carbohydrates, I would know breads, cereals, pastas, and rice, because that's the only one for that one. And then, which is kind of easy, carbs, you got your bread and your pasta, right? And then protein, no legumes, because I think the question was on that one. No milk, and I think vegetables as well, because they might try to trip you up by saying, oh, which one gives protein? And vegetables might be one of the options, and they might just be doing that to try to trip you up, right? So know that. Now, everyone knows protein provides energy, right? Carbohydrates. So let me rephrase that. Protein builds and repairs the body cells, okay? I would remember that portion, and obviously it provides energy. Know that carbohydrates provide energy for the brain and the nervous system. And then know fat provides essential fatty acids and helps with fat-soluble nutrients like vitamins. So I remember with fat, I remember bile and vitamins, carbohydrates, energy for the brain and the nervous system, and protein, energy, and repairing blood cells. Okay, use of force guidelines. I know we went over this in Chapter 3, but in case you haven't gotten there yet, we'll review this one here. Chapter 776. Oh, and there will be force guidelines on this test, of course. So hopefully by now you've went through Chapter 3, and this will just be extra training. Chapter 776 is the use of force chapter. Let's see here. So 77605 addresses the issue of an officer using force to make an arrest. Okay, we know that. Chapter 944 addresses the use of force specifically by state correctional and correctional probation officers. You may need to know that. I would memorize it just in case. 945 establishes that the Department of Corrections has jurisdiction over the supervisory and protective care, custody, and control of inmates and offenders. Okay, objective reasonableness. Test question. The courts use this to decide whether an officer's use of force is an appropriate response to a subject's resistance. Appropriate force is the amount of force reasonably necessary to make an arrest. So know those two there. Objective reasonableness and appropriate force. Okay, no Graham v. Connor. Reasonableness after the fact, right? Totality of circumstances. Okay, the courts recognize we have to make split-second decisions, etc. Okay, authority to use force. Much litigation against criminal justice officers is not about the amount of force used, but whether the use of force was permitted at all. Basically meaning, once you're allowed to use force, you're really allowed to use as much as necessary, right? It's just whether or not you should be using it in the first place is really the issue. Okay? Correctional officers have full-time authority over inmates due to the inmate's sentence and loss of certain rights. No de-escalation, escalation, and disengagement. So force decisions may escalate and de-escalate rapidly in relation to the perceived threat. An officer's goal is to achieve subject compliance. Again, an officer's goal is to achieve subject compliance. Compliance is the verbal or physical yielding to an officer's authority without apparent threat or resistance of violence. Know those two right there. Okay, escalation is increasing the use of force or resistance. De-escalation is decreasing the use of force or resistance. And disengagement is discontinuing a command or physical use of force, for example, by breaking away from a subject. Officers are legally permitted to escalate their use of force as the subject escalates their level of resistance. All right, here. If you place a subject in a prone position to apply restraints, remove them from the prone position and place them into a position of comfort as soon as practical. Okay, bolded topic here. The force guidelines provide a framework, keyword framework, for making decisions involving the reasonable use of force by criminal justice officers. The structure of the force guidelines is based on constitutional considerations and case law and describes appropriate decision-making in fluid and dynamic situations. All right. Passive resistance. This is a subject's verbal or physical refusal to comply with an officer's lawful direction, causing the officer to use physical techniques to establish control. Know these examples of passive resistance. A subject refusing to move at the officer's direction. A subject refusing to leave the vehicle when arrested during a traffic stop. A subject refusing to take their hands out of their pockets or from behind their back. So remember passive resistance as passive meaning they're not doing anything. So passive resistance is they're not doing anything. You can then use physical techniques to establish control. That doesn't mean you can't start beating on anybody, but you can start grabbing them, okay? Then we move into active resistance. Is the subject's use of physically evasive movements directed toward the officer, such as bracing, tensing, pushing, or pulling to prevent the officer from establishing control over the subject. Know these examples. A subject physically hanging onto a person or object to keep from being removed. A subject bracing or pulling away from an officer when this officer grips their arm. And a subject trying to run when the officer touches or tries to grab the subject's arm or shoulder. So again, at active resistance, that is when you are going to grab them and they are physically pulling away or tensing, pushing, pulling, etc. At this point, that's when you can use strikes. Then you have aggressive resistance, is hostile attacking movements that may cause injury but are not likely to cause death or great bodily harm to the officer or others. Some examples of aggressive resistance include a subject balling up their fists and approaching the officer, a subject pushing the officer back as the officer tries to take them into custody, a subject grabbing any part of the officer's body. Deadly force resistance. Keyword here. It is hostile attacking movements with or without a weapon that create a reasonable perception by the officer that the subject intends to cause and has the capability of causing death or great bodily harm to the officer or others. Here are some examples. A subject refusing to drop a knife when ordered to by an officer and choosing to move towards the officer. A subject shooting or pointing a gun at an officer or another person. Or a subject using a vehicle to try to run down an officer. Okay, officer response options. Try to resolve a situation with the least amount of force necessary. Command, presence, and verbal communication often will diffuse many volatile situations. These are test questions here. You may have to use physical force to gain control. Physical force includes physical control, using less lethal weapons, and deadly force. Again, this was a test question 100%. Physical force includes physical control, less lethal weapons, and deadly force. And know this as well, you need not apply force in gradually increasing steps to justify physical control or even deadly force. Instead, you should respond with force that is reasonably necessary for the circumstances in each situation. Officer presence, test question, is your ability to convey to subjects and onlookers that you are able and ready to take control. Subjects and onlookers' reactions to you depends on their perception of how you present yourself. Okay, be aware of nonverbal communication, bawling their fist, shifting their feet, hiding their hands, etc. Command presence, test question, is your demeanor and the way you exhibit confidence through erect posture, alertness, and attention to surroundings. So again, officer presence is ability to convey that you're ready to take control, and command presence is your demeanor and exhibiting confidence through, obviously, posture, alertness, and attention to surroundings. It's how you carry yourself, okay? A good command presence projects an image of confidence in your skills and abilities to perform the task at hand. Command presence includes personal appearance, your uniform, and grooming as well. Physical control, test question, is achieving compliance or custody through the use of empty hand or leverage enhanced techniques, such as pain compliance, transporters, restraint devices, takedowns, and striking techniques. A less lethal weapon is not fundamentally designed to cause death or great bodily harm, test question. Some examples include electronic control devices, ECD, conducted electrical weapons, CEW, expandable batons, flashlights, and chemical agent sprays. Okay, here we go. Know that 776.06 is deadly force, and 776.07 justified in the use of force or deadly force if necessary to prevent the escape from a penal institution. Test question here as well. I know there's a lot of them. Bear with me. Using deadly force may be an officer's first and only appropriate response to his perceived threat. 100% test question. You memorize that line, you're guaranteed to get 1% on that test. Deadly force does not necessarily mean that someone dies from the force used. That's also a possible test question there. It can cause great bodily harm or no harm at all. For example, striking the throat is deadly force even if the officer misses the target. Know that the decision to use deadly force is a serious one. Base your decision to use deadly force as a defense tactic on a clear, reasonable belief that you, a fellow officer, or another person faces imminent danger of death or great bodily harm. Okay. Officers have a legal responsibility to prevent excessive use of force or intervene during an excessive use of force encounter by other officers. So that's also a test question there. Okay, we have a legal responsibility to prevent and intervene. Let's see here. To intervene, a non-duty officer must observe another officer engaging or attempting to engage in excessive use of force, choose an intervention that is reasonable based on the totality of circumstances, or not jeopardize their own health or safety. Okay, factors for deciding to use deadly force. Officers use 3 criteria for making deadly force decisions: ability, opportunity, and intent. Okay, ability, these are test questions, know these. Again, 3 criteria for making deadly force decisions. Test question right there alone, and then know the definitions of each of these because there's test questions out of all of them, all right? Ability refers to the subject having the means to carry out their intent to cause death or great bodily harm. Opportunity means the subject is capable of acting on a plan to cause death or great bodily harm to the officer or others. And intent is the subject's intention to voluntarily make the bodily movement that becomes the act to commit a criminal offense. Okay? Officers should use the amount of force necessary and reasonable for the situation. The totality of circumstances, test question, considers the overall facts of a situation to determine if you had the authority to detain someone for committing a crime or to perform a legal search. Okay, reference to defensive tactics. This is also a term the court uses to refer to all facts and circumstances known to the officer at the time. Okay, situational factors. Know these situational factors just off the top of your head. They'll be on the test in different formats. So, the subject's size, age, weight, physical condition, severity of the crime, mental health, violent history, combative skills, access to weapons, how long the confrontation lasts, your size, age, weight, physical condition, etc., and environmental factors. Okay. Know the force guidelines decision-making process graph. So you have subject resistance that becomes situational factors, officer response, and then your justification. So know the examples in each box here. So subject resistance is the subject verbally or physically resisting my lawful authority, attacking movements. Situational factors, so weapons, physical size, demeanor, what are your training and experience, physical size, and environmental factors. The officer's response, can I physically control them? Could I use less lethal? Is deadly force appropriate? And then your justification, were my actions reasonable based on the subject's resistance? Am I able to articulate the reasons for my actions? And was I in compliance with constitutional and state laws, agency policies, and training? So know each of the examples under which box, because all 4 of those will probably be test questions as well. Use of force reporting. Many agencies require an additional report anytime an officer uses force to control a subject. Okay. Here we go. Survival stress reaction. A person's coping mechanisms govern their ability to manage stress. Okay, survival stress. This was, I think, in first aid as well, is the body and mind's response to a perceived threat. The stronger you perceive the threat, the stronger your body and mind will react. This will increase your anxiety level. Okay, as anxiety increases or decreases, it creates a physiological imbalance. Okay, here we go. Know that it could cause an elevated heart rate, increase in respiration, and the pausing of digestion. Okay, know that people responding to survival stress, 1 of 4 ways: fight, flight, posture, or submit. Okay. To submit is to completely relinquish control to another. Subjects might also become verbally and physically threatening, indicating they may resist by assuming a threatening posture. Okay. Conversely, the officer might posture by displaying a show of force without actually using force. So again, that's just your command presence. Okay, physiological changes under stress. So increased heart rate, amplified hearing, distorted vision, loss of bladder and bowel movement, increased reaction time, motor performance changes, loss of fine motor skills. Test question here. Fine motor skills are the muscle control required to make small, precise movements, such as unlocking handcuffs with a key. Think fine, think small. Heavy reliance on gross motor skills, gross meaning larger, movements of the larger or major muscles of the body to do things like run, punch, or kick. Loss of complex motor skills. Test question. Complex motor skills are tasks that require a combination of fine and gross motor skills using hand-eye coordination timed to a single event, such as driving a vehicle. Then you have complete breakdown of motor skills, such as freezing or submitting, occurrences seeming faster or slower than they are, and objects appearing closer or further than they are. Know that decision-making becomes more difficult in stressful situations. That's the test question there. There are, shortcut decisions here. Basically, shortcut decisions are just basically decisions you've trained over and over again, and you automatically know the right decision to make. Signs of stress often show up in vocal quality and speech pattern. Okay, so high stress situations can cause vocal cords to constrict and lead to a higher pitch in the voice, and sometimes cracked or garbled sounds results. Okay. Here we go here. Okay, so threat awareness. Know what the threat awareness spectrum is. It is an illustration of how survival stress may affect your reaction to a perceived challenge or threat. So we have condition white, condition yellow, orange, red, and black. So white is unaware that a threat exists. Yellow is general awareness of possible threats. Orange is recognition that a threat exists. Condition red is a specific threat identified and appropriate actions taken. And condition black, the threat was mismanaged due to panic stress response. Okay, so with condition, you know all these examples. Well, know all these definitions and examples. So under white, attention is unfocused or preoccupied. Yellow, attention is focused. Orange, awareness of a specific threat encourages pre-planning and more intense focus. Condition red, threat is assessed and managed through intensified cognitive and physical reactions. And condition black, survival stress functions breakdown. So you have submission or freezing. Okay, let's see here. So test question, your desired state of awareness while on routine duty is condition yellow. Okay, this is the optimum state of mind to remain focused while scanning for potential problems. From condition yellow, you can quickly move to condition orange or condition red based on the situation. White and black are not optimum states of readiness while on duty. Survival stress is a mind-body reaction to fear. You can increase your coping skills and better prepare for the effects of stress by doing the following. Pre-plan. Stay physically fit. Get enough rest. Keep a nutritious diet. Use controlled breathing techniques. Rely on techniques that involve gross motor skills. Train under realistic environmental conditions. Anticipate the possibility of resistance. Stay proficient in physical and mental skills. Stay proficient with firearms and other issued equipment. All right. Fundamental principles of defensive tactics. So let's first talk about balance. These are test questions here. Balance is maintaining a balanced posture and is essential in performing any technique. Okay, head and hips must be aligned and your weight distributed evenly between your feet. Okay, if any of these points is misaligned, you are not in balance. Balance displacement, test question, is a controlling technique used to break the subject's balance through the use of leverage principles. Leverage, using a great force against a weaker resistance. It is used in conjunction with joint manipulation or pain and mechanical compliance to gain control. Pain compliance, a subject responds to a combination of pain and verbal commands to stop resisting. Mechanical compliance, an officer may gain control over a subject by applying pressure or leverage on a joint by locking it up so that no movement of the joint is possible, causing the subject to comply with verbal direction. Joint manipulation, an officer may gain control over a subject by bending or twisting a joint in a direction that will cause pain or discomfort to the joint. Motor dysfunction, an officer may gain control over a subject by using an incapacitation technique that causes temporary impairment of muscular control. Penetrating strike, remember these are all bolded test questions. When an officer strikes a muscle so that the striking object penetrates the muscle and nerves of the target area. This is a full transfer of kinetic energy that increases the power of the strike. For maximum effectiveness, most strikes are delivered using penetration so that the striking object stays on or identified in the target for an instant, allowing for energy transfer. So basically, penetrating strike is you are punching past the target. So that way the full power keeps following through. You don't punch somebody at the end of your target. Know what a clinch is? A technique that involves holding a person tightly in a closed position. You can use the clinch with striking techniques to transition to a takedown or as a stalling technique. Okay. Communication and commands. Communication is crucial at all levels of the use of force exchange. Okay. Communication is a part of all officer-subject interactions, and effective communication on your part can help de-escalate a situation. So that's a test question right there in itself. Communication, this is a test question, the definition here, is exchanging information through verbal and nonverbal methods. It provides valuable insight into the likelihood of cooperation and compliance of a subject. Dialogue, test question, is a controlled, unemotional communication between an officer and a subject aimed at problem solving and communication. Used as a strategy, dialogue is intentionally designed to gain rapport and exchange information. Verbal direction is the use of proper, clear, and concise commands to let a person know what you need or expect them to do. The ability to give verbal direction is usually the first step in controlling the subject's actions. Establish yourself as a criminal justice officer, give clear and concise commands, and make sure that your commands are loud enough for the subject to hear. Touch is a non-threatening, non-custodial physical contact and can be used to support or emphasize a verbal command. Okay? Before applying touch, consider it to use carefully to avoid escalating a person's resistance. Okay, here we go. How you assess a situation and the level of threat you perceive will influence how you respond. The more information you have, the better prepared you are. Test question, recognize that threats may be fluid and constantly changing. Continuously analyze situations for their threat potential. Okay, so nonverbal cues of possibility of aggression would be increased breathing, stopped all movement, clenched fists and quivering hands, refusal to show palms of hands, reddened or flushed face, prominent expanding veins on face and forearms, shifting of shoulders or change of stance, glancing at a target area, ignoring the officer, and rapid angry movements. Be aware of unusual symptoms that a subject may exhibit upon initial contact or that may develop or intensify during the course of confrontation. Let's see. These symptoms may indicate serious issues such as physical illness, mental illness, drug reaction, overdose, traumatic PTSD, etc. Environmental factors. Some potential environmental factors to consider in threat assessment include weather, traffic condition, terrain, and presence of animals, bystanders, and potential weapons. That's a test question as well. Stances. When you interact with a subject or encounter a situation that you believe poses a potential threat, assume one of the following stances as appropriate. Okay, so we have our interview stance. I'm not going to give the steps here. You should know them from learning them in class. The offensive ready stance and relative positioning. So when preparing to approach a subject, place yourself in the safest possible position. Relative positioning, test question, describes where you stand or position yourself in relation to the subject. Body movement, test question, refers to how you approach a subject or enter a scene. The reactionary gap, test question, is a distance you must keep between you and the subject to react effectively over a sudden threat change. Okay, this distance is generally 6 to 9 feet if you have visual control of the subject's hands, or 25 feet when you cannot see their hands. So again, reactionary gap, 6 to 9 if you see their hands, and 25 feet when you cannot see their hands. The area within the reactionary gap is the danger zone. Anytime you are in the danger zone, the potential for physical harm increases. If you need to close the reactionary gap, do so as quickly as possible while maintaining good balance. Okay. Visual control of the hands. Test question here is the ability to see both the subject's hands and to know that they are not holding any weapons. Okay. Know these graphs here in regards to the danger zone and the reactionary gap. Okay, demonstrate hand clearing. All right, know that step. You just tell them to put their hands up. Okay, the reaction time principle. Test question is the amount of time it takes for the brain to process a physical threat and the body to respond. Okay, the process involves perceiving and analyzing the threat, forming a strategy, and then initiating motor actions. That is a test question as well, so you probably get 2 out of that one. In other words, the officer sees the threat, figures out what to do, and then takes action. The person, possible test question here, the person who effectively manages the distance in a use of force encounter has a better chance of success. This applies during grappling and striking. Then we have evasion and redirection. Use evasion and redirection movements to avoid or redirect an attack. Evasion is simply shifting your body or sidestepping to avoid the attack, and redirection is using empty hand techniques to move the subject away. Okay, know how those work. Pressure points. Test question. These are techniques used to control resistant behavior by using pain compliance, pressure, or leverage. Okay. You have touch pressure. Test question. Touching the location of a nerve or sensitive area and applying continual, uninterrupted pressure with the tip of the fingers or thumb until the subject complies. Stabilization. Immobilizing the subject's head so that the subject can move or escape. Be careful not to apply too much pressure or torque to the neck or spine when stabilizing the head. As soon as the subject complies by obeying your commands, release pressure to stop the pain. Use caution when applying a pressure point technique. Okay, then you have your different types of pressure points. You have under the jaw. You have hollow behind the ear. Actually, okay, so these 4 techniques, there were test questions on them. It was when to use them. So the question came up is, when you want a seated, kneeling, or prone subject to stand up, what pressure point technique do you use? It'll be under the jaw. So under the jaw is when they're seated, kneeling, or prone, and you want them to stand up. Some of these are common sense if you really think about it. So just sometimes if you're forgetting in the middle of the test, just think about it a little longer. Hollow behind the ear. You use this technique on a seated or prone subject or on a subject who is holding onto a fixed object. So since this one is similar to the last one, but the only difference is you use the hollow behind the ear when they're holding on to a fixed object. Okay. Hollow behind the collarbone. You use this when you want a standing subject to sit, lie down, or move to another location. Okay, so again, this one is when they're standing, and you want them to sit or lay down. Elbow behind the shoulder blade. Use this technique to reach the arms or wrists, for example, for handcuffing. Okay, or use this on a subject who is on their stomach with their hands tucked under their chest. Okay. Those are the 4 techniques. I'll just briefly go over them again. You have, again, the pressure point techniques. Under the jaw, hollow behind ear, hollow behind the collarbone, and elbow under shoulder blade. Okay. Those are the 4, and know when to use them. Then we move to escorts and transporters. Officers may encounter subjects who refuse to obey their commands but demonstrate no physical resistance. Okay. Escorts. The escort position is a technique used to move a subject from one point to another without using pain compliance. So escort, no pain compliance. It provides minimal control of the subject through leverage. If a subject resists, you may move to the transporter technique. An escort may be your first physical contact with a subject. You apply pressure or leverage on a joint to lock it, and the subject complies. Transporters. Transporters, sometimes called come-along holds, know those 2 interchangeably, are techniques used to move a subject from one point of another with pain compliance or mechanical compliance. The following transporter techniques are included in this lesson: the hammer lock and the shoulder lock. Okay, so hammerlock transporter. The hammerlock is a useful technique applied when a subject tries to pull away from the escort position. This technique uses pain compliance and mechanical compliance. Then you have the shoulder lock transporter. The shoulder lock transporter is a good controlling technique because of the position in which you put the subject's arm. This technique incorporates pain compliance, joint manipulation, and balance displacement. It can also be applied on a handcuffed subject. Okay. Let's see here. All right. Examples here. Okay, then we're moving on to restraint devices. Restraint devices are tools such as handcuffs, which are designed to temporarily restrain a subject's movements. Okay, so that's a test question there. Handcuffs, test question, are temporary restraint devices frequently used to control a subject. All right. Okay, you need to know the nomenclature for handcuffs. Okay. I'm not going to say them here. You just really need to know the graph, because if I say them, it's not going to help you at all. So just know where they are for the test. A lot of them are decently self-explanatory, but you do need to know that graph. You will probably have a picture of that, probably a few of them, and we'll ask you where they are. Like, here's an arrow. Where are they? Okay. 3-point pin. Okay, a 3-point pin is used to control the subject for handcuffing. A 3-point pin can effectively control the subject through mechanical or pain compliance by using the subject's shoulder and wrist. Handcuffing technique. Handcuffing techniques may vary depending on the compliance level of the subject, but the basic steps, I'm not going to go through them here. Just remember that step 1 is always using loud, clear verbal commands. Okay? Let's see here. For most steps, that's going to be your first one. So that's a little trick as well. Again, removing handcuffs, again, loud, clear verbal commands. So if they ever ask for step 1 on any of these moves or controls or transports, escorts, or whatever, you usually have loud, clear verbal commands. Waist chains are another type of restraint device used by correctional officers, so just know that for correctional officers. Leg restraints, also called leg irons, are generally used along with waist chains to limit the movement of a subject. Again, loud, clear verbal commands. Flexible restraints. Flexible cuffs and flexible leg restraints are two common types of flexible restraints. So the test question might ask which of these are a flexible restraint. So just know those as well. Okay. Flexible cuffs, using a single flexible cuff or double flexible cuffs. Place the cuff around the subject's wrist. Removing flexible cuffs. Use care when removing flexible cuffs. Make certain the cutting instrument used to remove the cuffs does not have sharp pointed ends or an exposed blade. Okay, so those have to be cut off. Then you have flexible leg restraints. Okay, so frisks and searches. A search is a government intrusion into a place in which a person has a reasonable expectation of privacy. Okay, that's a test question there. Pat down, test question, is a physical frisk of a subject conducted in a predetermined pattern to locate weapons. Okay, reasonable suspicion, know this definition, means that facts or circumstances exist that reasonably indicate that the person has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a violation of the law. Okay, use the plain touch field doctrine. The officer may seize any object whose contour or mass the officer identifies as apparent contraband. So know the plain touch and field doctrine. That is Minnesota v. Dickerson. Okay, and with Adams v. Williams, that is the pat down. Okay, so Adams v. Williams, the pat down. Plain touch and feel is Minnesota v. Dickerson. Okay, let's see here. Okay, custodial search technique, test question, is used when a subject is taken into custody in an unsecured environment. Okay, unlike a pat down, this is a complete search of the subject. Perform a custodial search of a subject in a systematic and predetermined pattern using the quadrant search approach. Test question. This divides the body into 4 sections, horizontally and vertically. Okay? The primary purpose of a custodial search is to detect potential weapons or contraband. Test question there as well. Okay, steps on how to do it. Okay, then you have inmate search techniques. So obviously, we're not going to do these. This is for corrections. So you have a closed search. Closed searches of inmates can be conducted at random by officers during the course of their daily routine. That's over their clothes. Strip or unclosed search. Obviously, we strip it. They're not closed. Body cavity search. Obviously not for us. They are done by appropriate health services staff members. Okay, blocks and strikes. Blocks are reaction techniques using the arms, legs, or body to deflect or redirect an impending strike from a subject to areas of the body. Test question. Okay, you have your upper area block, your mid area block, and then we move on to strikes. Test question. An empty-hand striking technique is any impact technique using hands, arms, elbows, feet, legs, knees, or head to strike a subject in an offensive or defensive situation. The entire body can be used as a weapon. This could include punching, hitting, kicking, or slapping. Know this deadly force and non-deadly force chart of where on the body there is deadly force. So just know that everywhere is non-deadly force except the throat is a deadly, right, that is a deadly force, you hitting somebody in the throat. So when it comes to empty hand striking techniques, the only place that is deadly force is the throat. Okay, let's see here. Then we move on to temporary motor dysfunction. This is a type of incapacitation that temporarily impairs muscle control, such as a cramp. Strikes to the skeletal structure are also effective. Okay, here we go. I'm looking at this chart here. Okay, striking the throat is considered deadly force. And so punching and striking the eyes is non-deadly, but gouging the eyes is deadly force. So again, it's only the throat or gouging the eyes. So there are two types of methods for delivering strikes. You need to know these: penetration and snapback. A penetrating strike is typically used to strike a muscle. It's where you penetrate and you punch past their body, like we talked about earlier. Okay? A snapback strike is delivered and then retracted very quickly, thus enabling multiple strikes, creating distance, setting up next techniques, or distractions. So again, what are the two methods of delivering strikes? Penetration and snapback. Here we go. Okay, wide stable stance. Okay, here's all your different types of strikes. Okay, so a palm heel strike. You defuse the situation, gain control of the subject with a palm heel. Obviously, the heel of your palm, you strike the subject. Punches. Okay, self-explanatory. Hammer fist strike. It is, okay, test question. The hammer fist strike is one of the most powerful strikes you can use. And that's just with a hammer fist. You have your back fist strike. This can often give you a tactical advantage and may incapacitate or break the concentration of the attacker. Your elbow strike is generally used as an initial or follow-up strike and is good for creating distance. And remember, you don't do an elbow strike with the tip of the elbow, but with the area of the arm about 1 inch below or above the elbow. Knee strike. This is when you are near or close to your subject. Okay, some strikes may be used as a diversion technique. Test question. Diversion is a technique that interrupts the subject's concentration so that energy is redirected from the current focus. So these are going to be your diversion strikes here and your kicking strikes. So you have your front kick. So when someone comes towards you, you kick them in the front. Angle kick. This is just to disable a subject that begins to attack you. Try to use a penetrating strike when using the angle kick, so you're kicking through their leg. Then we move into takedowns. Takedowns are techniques used to bring a resisting subject from a standing position to the ground, making it easier to control them. Okay? There are several types of takedown techniques. We'll go through them now. You have your straight arm takedown. This is versatile and allows you to move into a control position for a resistant subject. Let me see here. You have the hammerlock takedown from a hammerlock transporter, restrained or unrestrained. You have your shoulder lock takedown from a shoulder lock transporter. You have it restrained or unrestrained. The rear takedown allows you to take down a subject and establish control. The front takedown, you're taking them down from the front. Make sure you're careful where you place your head. Put it over their heart, not under their arm. The hip roll is an effective defensive subject. Is an effective defense against a subject who closes the gap quickly. Okay, hip roll. upright grappling and body hold escapes. Okay, so grappling. Well, actually, here, this is a test question here. One of the most common attacks an officer may face is an upright grappling position. So that's one of the most common attacks. Grappling is the use of body mechanics to leverage or control another person. Okay, there are several types of upright grappling body holds. You have defend and escape from a front chokehold. Just know that the front chokehold is life-threatening. Execute this technique immediately, and you might have to go to deadly force on this one. So again, test question: a front chokehold is life-threatening. Defend and escape from a rear chokehold. The rear chokehold is usually the result of a surprise attack. Okay. Escape from front body hold over under arms. A front body hold is usually the result of a surprise attack. And escape from rear body hold over under. A rear body hold is usually the result of a surprise attack as well. Escape from a headlock. The headlock is usually the result of a surprise attack or struggle with a combative subject. Being in a headlock for an extended period of time can cause serious injury. Escape is crucial. To escape from a headlock, you must react quickly and apply leverage. Alright, examples here. Techniques on how to escape from the front headlock, escape from front football tackle. So, with all of these steps on all of these types, my advice, as it has always been, is to know the definitions, know the obvious test questions, the ones I've been going over. Yes, there will be some test questions on the steps for some of these, but if there's 5 to 20 steps per hold, escort, transport, strikes, you're going to have to learn like 1,000 steps, and that's just really not possible. So, like I always say, try to remember kind of the first and the last, and then once you've learned everything else, then go back and try to slowly learn the steps. But a lot of them are also self-explanatory, and you do go over these holds and techniques in class, so just try to remember how you did them in defensive tactics training and try to apply that to the test. You have escape from a front football tackle, and next we move into diversions. Okay, you have diversion techniques. We have the headbutt, the foot stomp, and the shin scrape. So like I mentioned earlier about learning the steps, the questions are more going to be along the lines of which of these are diversions, right? You just learned that the headbutt, the foot stomp, and the foot scrape are diversions. So if they ask that question and they say escape from front football tackle, that's not a diversion, right? That's an escape. So kind of know more of that than necessarily the steps. Okay, vascular neck restraints. The vascular neck restraint compresses certain veins and arteries in the back of the neck to cause the subject to lose consciousness briefly. That's a test question. Okay. You have the standard vascular neck restraint. With these restraints, you need to check with your agency policies and procedures if you're even allowed to use these to begin with. Okay, ground control. Let's see. Ground fights present unique challenges to criminal justice officers because of the officer's equipment and likelihood of a sudden deadly force attack. Let's see here. Ground fighting is an anaerobic physical activity that will quickly tire you. A ground fight is exhausting and requires tremendous bursts of energy for short periods. Stalling, ding ding, test question, is a tactical method of safely controlling a suspect until you physically recover or reassess the situation or backup arrives. The stalling techniques presented here are based on leverage, not strength. There are 4 types of stalling techniques. You have guard stall, side control, full mount, and full mount stall. Okay. Then you have ground escape techniques. We'll go over those now. So your ground escape techniques are ground defense position. Okay, this is when you get to the standing position as quick as possible. Guard. Know the guard. Know the guard stall. This is to prevent the subject from mounting you. Know the guard break, which is breaking a guard. Know side control. Know that side control is the most basic of the stalling positions. Know how to defend and escape from side control. The full mount. Okay. Know that the full mount is considered the most dominant position in ground fighting. So little things like that is what you really need to know with a lot of these. You have the full mount stall. Okay. The bridge and roll. Know what the supine position is. That's lying on the back face up. You have the elbow escape. A whole bunch of examples here. Defending escape from a rear mount. Now we have impact weapons. Intermediate weapons, test question here, are tools used when empty-handed control is ineffective, but the subject's level of resistance does not merit deadly force. Okay, though intermediate weapons may cause death or great bodily harm, they are not fundamentally designed to do so. Okay, let's see here. The most common type of intermediate weapons include the following. Impact weapons, such as batons or weapons of opportunity. Specialty impact weapons, such as beanbag rounds or baton rounds. Electronic control devices, such as the CEW, and chemical agents. An impact weapon is any object used for striking. Impact weapons may disable or cause temporary motor dysfunction. Okay, unconventional impact weapons are also known as weapons of opportunity. So whether that be something you grab off the floor, your radio, pens, etc. Interview stance with an impact weapon. Know what this is. It is a low-profile stance with the weapon held partially hidden behind the leg. We do this all the time on the job. An offensive ready stance with an impact weapon is a high-profile stance with the weapon held at a shoulder position to enable a rapid strike. Okay, when it comes to impact weapons, know what's deadly force and what's not deadly force. So what I always do is I just remember the deadly force areas, and then everything else is just not deadly. So when you have some sort of impact weapons, the head is deadly force, the throat is deadly force, the neck is deadly force, and the groin is deadly force. So everything else is free game. Okay, impact weapon thrusts, impact weapon swings, impact weapon blocks, and let's get into electronic control devices. So the ECD, or electronic control devices, or also known as electronic immobilization devices, use a high voltage, low power electrical charge to induce involuntary muscle contractions that temporarily disable a non-compliant subject. Okay, again, high voltage, low power. So this is a test question. They're going to say high voltage, low power, low voltage. They're going to try to trick you up. So for electronic control devices, it is high voltage, low power. So what that means, it moves a lot, right? The voltage is high, but there's not a lot of power behind it, aka you get the point, right? Okay. Remember that a CEW, conducted electrical weapon, is a type of electronic control device. So electronic control device is the mother topic, where the CEW, electronic weapon, falls under it, right? So types of ECDs are the CEW, the handheld stun gun, electronic shield, electronic belt, and electronic sleeves. Chemical agents, okay? So there are two types of them. You have OC, oleoresin capsicum, and CS, orthochlorobenzol malonitrile. Fuck that one up, but it's alright. Okay, so both are generally used in the form of handheld canisters and chemical projectiles. Okay, so OC, commonly called pepper spray, know that. It is an inflammatory agent that causes tearing and involuntary closing of the eyes, nasal discharge, sneezing, disorientation, and a sensation of respiratory distress. Okay, skin turns red and puffy. The effects wear off in 20 to 30 minutes. Okay, OC is the preferred chemical method agent by law enforcement. CS is an irritant agent that causes burning and tearing eyes, nasal discharge, and skin and upper respiratory irritation. Okay, so remember the difference between two. OC is pepper spray, and it is inflammatory. CS is an irritant, okay? Then we have the contents of OC. Know that oleoresin capsicum is derived from cayenne pepper. Know that the active ingredient is capsicum. Or rather, capsaicin. It's close to capsicum. Just keep that in mind. Okay. Know the heat value of capsicum is measured in Scoville heat units, SHU. That will be a test question. They'll come up with 4 different ways to screw you up on that. It'll just be Scoville heat units, SHU. Okay. Know that Capsicum is mixed with a propellant consisting of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, or isobutane, okay, to expel it out of the bottle. Effects of OC. OC has been proved to be highly effective on a majority of the population. There may be circumstances where OC will not deliver expected results. Okay. The OC canister. So you need to know the nomenclature. So you have the safety cover, the actuator, the valve stem, the nozzle, the tube, the canister, and the formula. Okay, no decontamination procedures, psychological decontamination, physical decontamination. You have strobing, breathing, removing contaminants, air, water, and decontamination solutions. So these are ways to decontaminate. You have strobing. Strobing is forcefully blinking the eyes using all the muscles in the face, including those in the forehead. Breathing, obviously breathe. Removing the contaminants, okay. Air helps, water helps, and decontamination solutions. Documentation. Using OC is considered a use of force and should be documented appropriately. Then we have weapon retention. Getting to the end here, just bear with me. During a confrontation with the subject, an officer must control their weapons to prevent the suspect from taking them. So you'll learn some techniques. You have holstered immediate weapon retention. You have a drawn baton retention, holstered handgun retention, and drawn handgun retention. So know those types here. So this is a test question. The best defense against the subject grabbing your intermediate weapon is to maintain the reactionary gap. So just keep a distance, basically. Drawn baton retention. Know that. Your holstered handgun retention. Okay, the best defense against the subject grabbing your handgun is to maintain the reactionary gap, of course. Clear, loud, verbal commands. Drawn handgun retention. Use the cradle handgun retention technique when the subject grabs a drawn handgun barrel. Okay. Handgun defense. Handgun defense techniques are a last resort when an officer believes that the subject who has a handgun is going to shoot them. Okay. So you have surprise. Do not telegraph to the subject that you plan to counterattack. Telegraphing is revealing your intentions through small hand or eye or foot movements. So again, that's a test question. Telegraphing, revealing your intentions through hand, eye, or foot movements. Action is faster than reaction. When you enter the danger zone to deal with the subject, you are the initiator. The subject must react. So if you're close to them, you need to react first. Verbal distraction and physical proximity. Okay, here we go. Handgun cycles of operation. If you grab a revolver with the hammer cocked, you may stop it by firing, obviously grabbing the handle. I'm not going to talk about revolver stuff here. If you grab over the top of a semi-automatic pistol, you may stop the cycle from sliding. However, one shot may fire and the barrel will become very hot. You may also experience temporary flash blindness. Okay. General guidelines: when you're close with someone who has a handgun, move your body out of the way, control the weapon, and follow up with appropriate actions. Okay. Defense against edged weapons. That's generally deadly force. Only use open hand techniques when you have no other option. Let's see here if we got some test questions in here. The minimum safe distance for an officer to be able to react to an edged weapon attack without injury is about 25 feet. Okay. Knife patterns: you have your straight thrust, overhead attack with one or two hands, and the forehand slash. You have your defensive movements: evade, secure, and redirect. Okay, redirection and evasion techniques. Evasion is shifting your body away, while redirecting is, like we mentioned earlier, just redirecting them. Okay, techniques. Deadly force techniques. Empty hand techniques become deadly force when they have the capability of causing great bodily harm or even death. So if he attempts to choke or bite you, gouge your eyes, or grab your gun. Alright, let's see here. Using alternative weapons. So just remember whatever you need to use: flashlight, radio, pen, keys, pocket knife. If you're in deadly force, you need to use whatever you can to protect yourself. And that concludes Chapter 4, Defensive Tactics. I most likely will not create a short version on this one because, as you see, it was just test question after test question after test question. I probably gave you close to 100, if not 100 or more possible test questions from this video. So those of you that made it to the end, I'm proud of you for sticking it through. You are probably going to do fantastic on this test. For those that cut it early, unfortunately, if they didn't use a lot of other methods to study, they're probably going to struggle a little more than you. And hey, maybe they might do the same or better, but you're going to actually learn this material a lot more. So congratulations, you guys. I'll catch you in the next video. Deputy Z signing off.